Our next poet is a major modernist, T.S. Eliot. He was born in Mississippi, Missouri in 1888, and he came in the contact of many a poet and philosophers of his time. He was a poet, a playwright, a critic, and a publisher. And his major work, his early work, is a love song of Alfred J. Prufrock and other observations. And today we are going to take up for the study this early poem, Love Song of Alfred J. Prufrock. In fact, there is no love or song in this poem. It's a satire upon modern man. Modern man who has lost contact with the past, with the tradition. So this poet satirizes the modern man. The name Prufrock is a pseudonym. Prue is the term for prudish or excessively thinking character. So Mr. Prufrock is an archetype, a prototype of modern man who's thinking all the time but never takes his thoughts, never translates his thoughts into action. So such a man is the speaker of our new poem. I have a note of introduction for you, please. The Love Song of Alfred J. Prufrock is a poem written by T.S. Eliot. It was possibly written between 1910 and 15 and published in 1915. It is considered one of the quintessential work of modern poetry, modernism, a literary movement at the turn of 20th century that emphasized the theme of alienation, isolation, and the diminishing power of the traditional sources of authority. It was a reaction against the religious, political, social views of the time, a deliberate breakaway, a rupture from the past. So modern literature is essentially the product of the waste of war, and its theme are alienation, disintegration, fragmentation. The poem is in the form of a dramatic monologue or interior monologue in which the speaker narrates the anxiety and the preoccupation of his inner life. The whole poem is focused upon Prufrock's mind. It's a transcript of a copy of what goes in his mind. T.S. Eliot wrote this poem while he was in his early 20s. He later recalled beginning the poem while he was student of philosophy at Harvard University in 1909 and 10. And he finished it while traveling for a year in Europe, in Munich and Paris. T.S. Eliot's poem is not very much like Browning, My Last Touches, or any of his dramatic monologue, but it does grow from the example of the dramatic practice of Browning. It is through inventing the middle-aged persona. Mr. Prufrock is a middle-aged person. As he came to see it in the retrospect at least, that T.S. Eliot found a way of articulating something about himself. So it's a psychological poem, it's an autobiographical poem. He has become an archetype for the complex of over-scrupulous timidity. The Mr. Prufrock represents a complex. He is an example of timidity, shyness, and cowardice. He is a man paralyzed by an overwhelming anxiety about the possibility of his rejection by the society or getting the things wrong. So he is always conscious of rejection, frustration. It's a pessimistic statement about the modern life and the modern society. The note continues here. Prufrock displays the sum of the most important characteristics of T.S. Eliot's early poetry. It is strongly influenced by French symbolists. What is French symbolists? Mallarmé, Rimbaud, Baudelaire, and the fog. T.S. Eliot's discussion of his own poetic technique suggests that making something beautiful out of the refuse of modern life, as a crab sustains and nourishes itself on garbage, may in fact be the highest form of art. So in his essay written possibly in 1927, he came to give us a manifesto of modernism and modern poetry. He rejects Wordsworth's view that poetry is a spontaneous overflow of powerful feeling reflected in tonality. He rejects and asserts that poetry is not an expression of emotion, is finding a way of emotion. It's converting a personal emotion into art emotion, and art emotions are complex. So this poem, in this modernist poem, Eliot creates the character of Prufrock, a moody, urban, isolated, yet sensitive thinker. He is a pseudo-poet also. So the speaker is trapped in his own mind, full of hesitation, doubt that he is unable to act. In fact, he wants to propose someone, but he is so shy, timid, that he continues thinking in 135 lines of the poem, but never reaches the women to propose her. So this story actually is a metaphor of modern man's lack of courage to translate his will into action. Prufrock is best regarded as the voice of a certain kind of self-consciousness, and his poem as a sequence of images linked not by narrative chain of cause and effect, but by association and imaginative logic. So there is no narrative sequence or linear narrative in this poem. This poem is based upon associative logic, and it's an imagist construct, because T.S. Eliot was deeply influenced by his friend Ezra Pound's concept of imagism. So there is a certain irony in the manner in which the poem opens. We are now going to read the text itself and find the meaning of the opening verse paragraph, which sets the tone of the whole poem, long poem. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky like a patient it rise upon a table. There are 3-4 important features of this poem which we would like to discuss now. One of the features is the use of unusual kind of imagery. So, in the opening line, evening is a patient, the world is a hospital, and the patient is reclining on a table, a hospital table. This is the dominant image in the opening line. Prufrock is talking to some you inside his own mind. So Mr. Prufrock is the best example of split personality. He is divided between I and you, the two halves of his own self. And a woman is a part of some backstory to the poem, and the frustrated erotic life which is kept almost entirely under wraps. The play between the belated romanticism of evening, which is spread out against the sky, and the modernity of a patient etherized upon a table, purposely sets different sorts of world in juxtaposition. The poetical and the medical, the lyrical and the modern, they have been clubbed together. They have been brought together so we can find poetry mixed with the hospital imagery, the modern imagery, and this juxtapositional method is the main way the poem gets to work. The title of the poem bases the romance of the love song against the precise social formality of Mr. Prufrock. He repeats, let's go, and again, let's go, but the movement of the poem takes us nowhere. And in fact, the epigraph in Italian language, which comes from Dante's Divine Comedy, has already introduced the idea of going nowhere as a key theme in the poem. This epigraph is taken from Canto 27 of Dante's Inferno. We'll find out the meaning of this canto. The first allusion or quotation or reference from Bible, from Dante's Inferno. In the passage, Dante, who is touring hell, has begun to converse with one of the inhabitants called Guido the Manufacturer, who is initially reluctant to respond, but on the reasonable assumption that Dante must be in hell for all eternity, he begins to speak. So these are the Italian lines, and this is the translation. If I thought my answer were to one who ever could return to the world, this frame should shake no more. But since none ever did return alive from this depth, if what I hear be true without fear of infamy, I answer thee. So Guido speaks from hell and Mr. Prufrock speaks from the hell of his mind, because hell is not a place, it's a state of mind, state of pessimism. Modern man who has lost faith in God has become utterly pessimistic. He has lost the tradition, the values of the past. This is the theme, one of the themes of this poem. For T.S. Eliot to begin his poem with a voice from the depth of hell is to create another poem's formative juxtaposition and invite the reader to make out a connection. The world of the poem is nothing to do with the medieval Catholicism, but rather genteel New England society of his time. So the scene, the scenario of this poem is this excessively cultivated cultural society of his time. And these are the opening lines. Let us go through certain half-deserted states. Prufrock takes us on a mental journey through the street of a major metropolitan city. So the opening line describes the cityscape. He takes us through the street, through some cheap hotel, because hotels nowadays have become a place of prostitution than rest and comfort. Of restless nights in one night cheap hotels. So his way lies through these hotels. And sawdust restaurant with oyster shell, which reminds us of the inn, tavern and restaurant from the past. So there is a constant contrast between the present and past. The poet is valorizing past. He prefers past to the present. Streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent. So these streets are full of wickedness. That's one of the defining features of modern life. Is a major point is the wasteland, which shows a complete cultural disintegration, fragmentation. But the clue to this theme has already been defined in this poem. So the pseudo-poet compares negotiating the streets with a tedious argument. So it's very difficult for the modern man to negotiate these streets, and Mr. Prufrock cannot negotiate and reach his destination. So he is rooted in his drawing room and thinking. He is taking no journey, there is no action. To lead you to an overwhelming question, so he brings us not to the destination, but an overwhelming question which is related to his mother's suggestion that one should relinquish, give up one's desire, worldly desire, for an ideal Christian cause. For the community cause, he should give up his worldly desire, or do not ask what it is. So he is scared to spell out the being. Let us go and make our visit. In the room the women come and go. So now he brings us to a beauty parlor which is full of women. He loves one of the women, but he does not have the courage to reach the person and propose her. This represents the inability of the modern man to embrace the opportunity in life. Talking of Michelangelo, in this room full of the fashionable women, the cultured women, poor Michelangelo has become the point of gossip. He has been trivialized. The great painter, he is the point of gossip of these fashionable, cultural women. So the world is a beauty parlor. The yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window pane, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window pane. In the next verse paragraph, the dominant image is the image of fog. We are reminded of Dickens' fog in London corrupting everything. The same fog is visible here, but it appears in the form of a cat. So this fog turned cat represents the sordid reality of modern life. It represents the squalid, the morbid, sickly life, a moral life, because cat is essentially a moral character, a lazy character, a lazy animal, a secretive animal. So fog turned cat represents the quality of modern life. It's a symbol of modern existence, which is disease, sickly, immoral, sleepy life, lethargic life. The yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window pane, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window pane. When animal is tortured by the desire, the sexual desire, it starts rubbing its back or muzzle or mouth on the bark of the tree, but in this case it's rubbing its back on the window pane or muzzle on the window pane. So modern man is driven by lust, and cat is symbolic of this lustful animal behavior. The sacred passion is replaced by this animal passion, and it dominates the modern life. It governs the modern existence, the modern behavior. Licked its tongue into the corners of the evening, lingered upon the pools that stands in ringing. I told you it's a dirty, squalid life. So there is an image of drain and the cat circle, all such squalid, dirty places that fall upon its back, the smoke that falls from the chimney. So soot is that substance, that black substance falling from chimney, it has covered the cat. Dark, black color are symbols of corruption, degradation, fragmentation of life. Slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing that it was a soft October night, curled once about the house and fell asleep. attribute this animal is a sleepy character. So we now conclude this stanza. There is a short note here. The poem introduces a sick and ominous world. Like everything else in the poem, the tired, sleepy evening is an aspect of Prufrock's mind. Like the fog, a symbolist, a French symbolist, Eliot Prufrock encounters a clash between his thought and feeling. The urban setting of Prufrock evokes T.S. Eliot's study of French modern, and he was following the symbolist, the major French symbolist. The evening suggests the colorless world that Prufrock inhabits. The fog of the unreal city is the symbol of squalor, purposelessness, shameful limbo of modern life, and the cat, sensual, immoral, alive with pride and conscious of her own isolation, self-sufficiency is the major image. So this poem is an imagist construct. Images cluster together to form the meaning of this poem. The fog-turned cat represents unreality, isolation from the traditional value that alone give time its significance. So modern man has lost connection with the traditional value. Like Baudelaire, another symbolist, he presents the more sordid aspects of the modern metropolis. His way through the half-deserted cheap hotel of the foggy London being much like Dante's, the moorland being. So modern life has become hellish because it's separated from the age-old tradition and its value. The city wandering lead to an unescapable, overwhelming question, and this question is related to T.S. Eliot's mother's suggestion, and we have a clue to this suggestion and the details of this suggestion in this coming line. Eliot beats the drum of progressive thought, an idea which was popular in his time. Moreover, the overwhelming question arises twice, first in line number 10 and then in line number 93. And it assumes an aura of sublime mystery. The quality of life for which it stands is compared with the past and judged as lacking those values for which the past stood. The enemy in the poem is retreat. The antithesis of progressive thought is the mother's argument for an ideal life. So this poem is a poem of the ideas of the time, and his mother's argument was to surrender one's private desire on behalf of a great Christian ideal. The streets follow like a tedious argument. Prufrock argues, let us retreat. A tedious argument follow automatically, and it will lead to self-delusion. So Mr. Prufrock is overawed by the condition in the modern society. He has lost something valuable in the form of tradition, culture, So modern life has become purposeless, meaningless. This is the substance of the poem, the opening lines of the poem.